National Security Advisor Rajiv Dogra met his UK counterpart Tim Barrow. India has asked UK to act against pro-Khalistan activists, including arresting and deporting them to India. Let me now go across to our guests. We have with us Terry Milewski, who has worked with CBC News. We also have with us Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, and we are also being joined by Puneet Sahani, expert on evolution of Sikh identity and Khalistan issue. Coming first to you, Terry, does the Canadian side recognize that the issue has in fact caused friction and are willing to react to it faster than we have seen them do in the past?
They do realize, and they are not prepared to do much about it. They realize, because of course this has been going on for decades now, that the Indian government has been banging the table and say, why don't you lock them up? Why don't you crack down on these Khalistanis that are causing tensions in our relationship? You just let them get away with anything. And the Canadians for decades now have been saying, sorry, we're not going to abolish free speech because it would be convenient to India. We'll work with you where there are, if there's any violence, where there are breaches of the law, then we will step in and these people will feel the pain. But more than that, we're not going to do. What both sides, I think, fail to realize is that causing friction is the point. For the Khalistanis, their whole game is to cause friction with these displays of martyr posters honoring mass murderers, with the diorama of celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and now with these latest posters naming all kinds of Indian diplomats all over the world as murderers. It's complete poppycock, of course, but causing friction is the point. They annoy everyone. So what happens is they get to pose as the defenders of Sikh rights. When governments push back, they say, you see, they're repressing us. And then they feed their whole purpose in life, their whole game, which is to control and to exploit the wider Sikh community, which for the most part can't stand them. And they do that by expanding their turf. Look, here's one provocation. Here's another provocation. Well, you didn't do much about those martyr posters. Now, here's a bigger martyr poster. Here's a truck with the diorama of Indira Gandhi's assassination. So I think both governments need to recognize the subtleties and the sophistication of the Khalistanis' game, rather than just banging the table and say, lock them up. We got to do a little better than that, I think.
Right. I want to go across to Puneet now. Puneet, Terry has said that in most parts, a vast majority of the Sikhs are not able to even stand this kind of narrative that is being developed by pro-Khalistan activists. What is your understanding of the situation?
It's a very small fringe, which is, doing all these acts of lunacy. And, the Sikhs are actually the biggest victims of these people is absolutely right. And you don't have to believe me, because, I'm a patriot or something. I can just give you the data, for example. So, to take an example, in 1997, this Khalistanis, so I'm talking about, and, there was an election in Gurdwara where they were, fighting and, swords were involved, helicopters had to come, sniffer dogs had to come. And the Supreme Court of British Columbia got involved, like, what the hell is happening? And they were like, okay, there is a fight for control of Gurdwara. And the Supreme Court said, okay, we will monitor the election. And in that election, it is just a temple. Like if you have like a Gurdwara election in Delhi, the population is pretty comparable. Even now, after a generation, like you have 3,000 or 4,000 people participating in a Gurdwara election. But back a generation, believe you me, I think 37,000 people came out to vote. Because they were like, okay, finally, there will be a proper election because the Supreme Court is monitoring. And what was the result of that election? First to last, Khalistanis lost all the seats.
So, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, coming to you, what needs to be done for helping other countries understand why this issue ends up causing friction and is a grave issue?
Well, I think that's very unfortunate that something which had petered out, something which was not in anyone's mind, should now be revived and revived in a very conscious manner, because any country which values its own citizens should realize that violence against any other country would ultimately result in violence against their own soil and against their own people. Let me give you one example. I think it was in 1985 that the Canadian government got to know that some Khalistani extremist elements were planning to either hijack or put a bomb in one of the Air India aircrafts. They even saw, the intelligence services even saw the rehearsals for it held in Canada somewhere. And they also had telephonic records of their plans. Yet they did nothing about it. And what happened eventually was that despite Indian requests that please check the baggage which goes into Air India aircrafts, because we suspect some sabotage activity to take place. The bomb was put in the baggage of an Air India aircraft and it exploded, resulting in nearly 330 deaths. Some of them may have been Canadian citizens. I mean Canadians of Canadian extraction. I don't mean only Indians who have taken up Canadian citizenship. So my point is that ultimately it also affects their own flesh and blood.
So that brings me to the next question, and Terry, I want to come to you. The Indian government has in the past accused and indicated that pro-Khalistan activists are pandered to for vote bank politics.
I think many of your viewers will probably already be aware, but it bears repeating. Remember, Justin Trudeau's government is a minority government that is sustained by the votes of a minority left-wing party, the NDP, which is led by Jagmeet Singh, who is a Khalistani sympathizer. It is not much more complicated than that, although beforehand, when they weren't sustained by the NDP, the Liberals played pretty much the same game. They like having, what politician doesn't enjoy the idea? They go into an election time and they go to the Gurdwara and the big shots there say, you know, we can deliver you 10,000 votes, all in a nice, neat package. They'll follow our leadership and we'll deliver you this a victory in this election. But if you don't sing our song, we can defeat you. Oh, okay. Well, so tell me the words of the song. So that's what happens. And remember also, something that your viewers may not know is that federal elections in Canada very often turn on just these few ridings in Ontario and in British Columbia where Sikhs are predominant. So 5 or 6 going this way or that way, that can make the election. Where they're what we call swing ridings, which decide elections. And so they have to be courted by politicians very carefully. And don't think that the Liberals are by any means the only ones who play that game. Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, they all do it.
So, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, final question to you. What more can be done by India to engage with and help others understand what the situation really means for the country?
It is a long battle with ISI, who have prepared well for this for almost close to 2 decades. And we should be prepared that now that they're confident that they have had things like referendum 2020, which got delayed because of COVID, and the posters, which are very, very unfortunate, they are not going to stop just by our pleadings with these countries. We have to do something more. ISI will not listen to any of our reasons or pleadings, but these countries can be made to understand the gravity of the situation. And if they don't, then we have to take concrete actions. Be it the reduction in the size of the embassy, or be it a message that if any harm comes to any of our diplomats, we cannot stop someone who in revenge wants to take a similar action against their diplomats in India. So I think we have to give up only the conversation part of diplomacy and get down to hard part of diplomacy now, because otherwise a person like Trudeau, who I must say is most uncaring and most unstatesmanlike in his reading of the situation and his reaction to India's requests.
All right, I'll have to thank all my guests on that note. It's a serious issue for India, something that India wants a response and a stern response from countries like UK, Canada, Australia, where we have seen the Khalistan, pro-Khalistan activists, in fact, even US making some sort of noise at the moment with regards to one rally that is to be held on the 8th as well.